The number of coronavirus cases in the U.S. is rising every day. One new case has been confirmed in Williamson County, Tennessee. Now, Huntsville Hospital is taking extra steps to make sure their patients are protected. They're asking people who have a fever, cough, body ache, or a sore throat to not visit the hospital unless they're seeking care. Right now, no more than 2 visitors are being allowed in a patient's room. Children under 16 are also not allowed to visit patients.
The less people we have here, the less germs are spread, the less chance somebody has to come in the hospital with just the flu or a common cold. The less people sneezing, the less chance you have that something's around that doesn't need to be around.
Huntsville Hospital has plans in place to identify and report cases of the coronavirus. So far, they have not had to test anyone for COVID-19.